Welcome to this webinar. I'm very excited. We're going to talk about the power of adaptability. And as you can see, it's really been a lot of adaptability this moment of time in this webinar. It really has a lot to do with the transformation and change of the opportunity that we're really in, because boy, it has been that, and everything that could possibly happen has happened. So welcome to let's see how we all adapt so easily moment of this webinar. It's really just it's not a skill either, because you have a lot to do with whether or not you are able to adapt within that moment and notice the things that are going on within you. It's not, and it may not be that necessarily it has so much to do with struggle as it does to do with how you're able to interpret the situation and the circumstances according to the uncertainty of things that you have done and the difficulty about going ahead with a plan that you have that's set in place. And adaptability is something that actually is more about what is interpreting with you than really what's happening. And I really like that, because two people can experience the situation and it could be totally two different interpretations of exactly the same situation. One can see it as more of a challenge and a way to grow, and the other can see it more of like a contraction, where it's like the different situation is almost an algorithm that's running that's separate from one person to the other. You and I could have totally different situations, or the same situation, two different types of ways that we would actually thrive in that moment. One would be able to thrive because they did it through stress, overwhelmedness. Could be that they have decided that they need to heighten the moment to make it so that they get in the attention in it. Or one may be able to just smoothly go through it because it's something that they've learned within their nervous system to really create through a different experience. That those experiences can change constantly, of course. Could be between different types of changes of your relationship. Maybe it's in your business. Perhaps it's in your body alone. Those are all things that can be something that we have to learn, especially as a child when we're growing up. As a child, when we start to learn our own bodies, we start to learn how things shift, how things move, how things really function. And even how technology these days are evolving. I think that that technology has really been moving so fast to the point where we have to adapt so quickly to every moment that it becomes almost the norm. Yet so much of our energy has been spent in really just staying the same. So either we learn, and I remember my parents calling me one day and saying, technology is moving so quickly. I don't know how to stay in the knowing because of the things like our phone, because it was so challenging for them to understand how to adapt to learning all the different apps, how to the updates, how to learn the different types of things that were on their phone alone, because it was so new for the way that they thought about things. Now, that was a long time ago. Phones have now been around for a while, but during the first times that it was really out, it was hard for their brains to adapt from an age where that wasn't a digital age. But the question wasn't really how did you learn how to adapt? It was like, how are you responding in the moment when you don't know how to? And many people just spend enormous amounts of energy just trying to control the situation as life really comes, because it feels so uncomfortable, almost like you are out of your own touch of who you are. That people just try to adapt or control the outcomes. They try to control people. They try to control the situations of timing, conversations. Maybe it's they try to control the uncertainty. And when life inevitably refuses to cooperate, they experience that level of stress, that heightened feeling. I know you can feel it, because we have that like fear, that overwhelmingness that really just comes in and overtakes you. That you don't know, and it's almost like panic, because you don't know how to experience the moment. It's a reality that, and an expectation that's placed in it, that you just don't know or have any capacity to match anymore. I think that the moment that we grip so hard is when we really come into that place where the truth becomes more of a suffering than a challenge. And even though change is inevitable and it's going to happen, some of us still try to grip onto the moment and we try to make it so that it's something that we can control rather than allowing the resistance of change to help move us and help us grow and learn from the situation. And how often are we spending so much more energy in the situation than is necessary when we could just simply take a deep breath and move through it? And how often are we replaying conversations we've had from the past or worries of the decisions? Maybe it's delay in the way that we're taking action. I think that sometimes, and I've had a conversation recently with people that have held on to relationships for so long because the inevitable of change and learning to adapt from a situation where they were in a relationship for so long, or even a job, has really caused that change or that pressure of events to really allow them to move forward. Because staying in something that you already know can be so much easier than learning something that's new. And I think that that alone can be really challenging for people in their behavior and the resistance. I think adaptability isn't necessarily avoiding the discomfort. It's more of like, it's about becoming more flexible in the discomfort. Not that you're not able to making the decisions, but it's more like it's where you're just feeling through in a more uncomfortable way and allowing yourself to really be able to grow, which rarely happens when we're uncomfortable, is where we learn to get into the comfortable. Healing isn't comfortable, but yet we're able to do and expand ourselves into something that is more comfortable as long as we allow it to move through. Even success can be so uncomfortable, but it's required in order to move through something that is in an adaptable way. People who grow and aren't necessarily the people who experience less fear, but the people that experience the ability to move through something as if it's fluid. It's as if we're water, like the rocks that are being ran over by a river. If you think about a river and how it flows, the water is not trying to push the rocks through, it's trying to maneuver around the different types of ways that it allows. Or think about a tree during a storm. The branches, if they're just so rigid, they break. They aren't allowed for that bending flexibility of the situation at hand. It's the reason that a tree actually can survive is because it can move throughout that moment of that storm. Yes, it has some deep roots, and I think that's where it becomes that foundation where that can be firm, that can reach out for the people that we need help from, or in moments of adaptability that we can trust, that we can stand on, that can be there. But as long as we can allow, because nobody can be flexible for us or learn how to adapt in every moment, so that we have to be at that ourselves. That doesn't mean that changes aren't going to come or that things are going to not be waverly or that we aren't ever bending. But that true strength often comes when it's very, very difficult. But it changes within and it starts within our mind. And I think that sometimes strength is just about letting go, trusting, allowing that part of yourself to really know that you can be there and for yourself. Sometimes strength is also walking away from something that no longer serves you. Because admittedly, strength is a version of yourself that you can just go to that will allow you to become that next version of yourself that is necessary. And that isn't always beautiful, and it isn't always easy, but it is something that is necessary. It doesn't mean that there's weakness or that something is wrong, it means that you are growing and that you're moving past a stage and leveling up almost in a way that has allowed you to become available for the new version of yourself or the new demands of the expectations that you become as you step into that new version of who you are. The people who adapt the fastest aren't necessarily the smartest or the most talented or the most experienced, but they are the people that have learned in the moment, in real time, right then when it's happening to you, how to really just move through and know that nothing's going to go wrong. Because even if it isn't something that is beautiful or that, whether it's through a relationship or business or whatever, that things are going to happen and life isn't perfect. People aren't perfect and it's not meant to be. That's not where the authenticity of yourself really lies. And if we allow that authenticity to really be and come through the moment to allow things to adapt in a specific way, then we're being so rigid that it won't. But if we allow it to come as it flows through, that discomfort and growth really just expands, not only with our relationship with ourselves, but with others. And it really does start with ourselves, because when you really trust yourself, it's like change becomes less threatening. You stop asking, what if this doesn't work? What if I can't make it through? And I'm sure we've all had those moments where we just got so overwhelmed and stressed that we couldn't manage the moment, that we went, what if this doesn't happen? What if I can't make it? And then you do. And it begins to open your eyes to all the possibilities of the things that you actually are capable of, because shift changes and it becomes this beautiful, magical moment. Now, why do we really resist change? Because we've either learned something that has happened in our past that hasn't allowed us to really move forward in a way that was easy. Most resistance to change is just very little to do with change itself. It just, instead, it activates in an existing pattern. Maybe a new opportunity triggered, what if I fail? Or a new relationship triggered something like, what if I get hurt? And nobody wants to get hurt, especially in any situation. No one wants to be vulnerable in a situation that allows them to get hurt again. But if we want to have love, or we want to have business, or we want to have success, we have to allow ourselves to heal and mend and know that the possibility of getting hurt again may happen. Or what if I lose everything and I have to rebuild? And that may be something that happens. But trusting yourself and knowing that you get to, the point is you get to rebuild and try something new, because you have all this experience you have from your past to do something new. And that is a different conversation that you get to have with yourself. A lot of people think that it's all about, well, what if people just reject me? Well, what if people do reject you? That's okay, because the only person that you have to be okay with is you. People reject people, and the event is happening in the moment, and that's okay. And you can recognize it for what it is, but that doesn't mean that it defines who you are. Because whatever you're responding to, or how you're responding to that moment that requires that adaptability, is often somewhere obviously much older than a pattern that you've had. So if you're wondering, can I move forward in a way that is going to allow me without feeling so rigid, without feeling like something's going to go wrong, look at the patterns that you have that are going on that maybe have not necessarily identical circumstances or situations, but something similar. Maybe it's a relationship that you're having that is with one person, and then another person that has some similar traits, and you start to notice that pattern. Perhaps there's that possibility that you see a person as something, or it maybe feels dangerous, or maybe it makes you feel like you freeze. The circumstances may be the same, but the interpretation is different when you start to recognize patterns that you have going forward. And that interpretation, it really just creates this emotional experience that most people believe are the reality of what their reaction is right now. And we know that that's not really the case because of all the patterns that you can see from the times and places, the beliefs, the memories, the things that you get from your ancestors and of times and places are activated. And that's why you can have two people standing side by side from each other and experience a whole situation and it be completely different. It's like standing in front of the same door and seeing an opportunity or seeing a risk. Which one do you see? Which one is when do you allow in that moment? And if you see your person standing next to you, and let's say it's your spouse, or let's say that it's your friend, and you're standing at a doorway, one is seeing all the opportunities that are out in front of them, and you're only seeing all the risks. Can you glean and recognize a different type of way of seeing something that allows you to move forward in a way that it can be more adaptable so that you can take on the type of ability to open and broaden yourself to a more advantageous way of moving forward? The important part is allowing yourself not to assign a door that is, I guess, not accessible because it can be too risky, but allowing you to move through it in a way that allows things and circumstances and change to be more open, adaptable, available as possibilities really happen and make it feel safer. And that's where we take a good look at our survival mode self. Are we allowing ourselves to move out of that survival mode and into more of a vulnerable state that allows us to really put ourselves out there where we're not, when we allow ourselves to be ourselves, we're not so stuck in the way that we think people need to see us or the way that things need to be done, or we just allow that real opportunity to understand who and what we are. We bring that situation and the events more authenticity and allow that pressure to dissolve in the way that a lot of times, perhaps in the past, has become such a problem or hard to maneuver through. I'm going to think about a simple example. Like your boss sends you a message saying, can we talk tomorrow? Well, for some people, nothing happens. You're like, okay, great. Immediately, that you just go, that's lovely. Let's talk to my boss. And you maybe even have a really great relationship. But for others, that anxiety immediately comes up. Your chest starts to tighten, your jaw starts to get really, really clenched. And you think, oh my gosh, my boss wants to talk to me. What am I going to do? And that immediate appearance of maybe your heart starts to race or your mind starts to, and you go, how am I going to maneuver through this? So the event didn't change between the two people, just the way that it was interpreted and the meaning and the brain functionality of the way that it was being interpreted really is what happened in the situation between two different people from previous experiences that attempted to predict what was really coming next. And that's the hardest part. It's that little tiny bit. It's that predictability about what they think is coming next based on all the experiences of their time and places that they had done things before. It probably isn't so much about being hurt as much as it's about protection. Because when we sit down with people and we work with them, and let's say we are working with somebody that wants to really work on their patterns or beliefs that they have been working on, usually everything comes down to safety and protection. Love. Even with love, they just want to feel safe in love. And I think that is one of the powerful things that helps us recognize, even within ourselves, where are we moving to? How are we moving and being moved to keep ourselves safe? Because awareness really allows that separation between staying in that adaptability and allowing things to flow like that tree, or being so stiff and rigid that our branches are breaking off and we're falling apart because we're being defined by it, and not allowing that space for choice or any other new synopsises to come through within our brain and saying, hey, this is what we can allow choice to have rather than what automatically comes up. Because when we just react, we sometimes can get that defensive avoidance way of trying to maneuver through something. We may even blame, or the big one, withdraw or overthink, and because we want to seek that certainty, not because we're weak, but because we're operating from a program that we already have from time and places before. And many people believe that adaptability is about changing the circumstances. What is happening outside of us? So when we look at any situation, we think it must be the person that's over there that's the problem. So even if you eliminate the person that's to our left or right, whatever, in a situation, the circumstance still is the exact same. The pressure is still there. So let's say we eliminate that person. The understanding of it really has to come to understand that that person probably had nothing to do with it, because it has everything to do with what's running inside us and the internal algorithm and pattern shift that allows us to see that it really comes from us, how we're interpreting, not the people that we're blaming or pointing fingers to. And that's the difference of the understanding of perhaps the same fears coming up from one person to another that can see something as possibility to risk. Once we're allowed to change that experience, it becomes much more familiar in an aspect that we can choose that ability to move forward in a way that's possibility. So if you ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now in any situation? It really allows you to open up the situation and analyze it in a way that can help you see whether or not you're actually moving through it in a way that's more adaptable. Even though it may be uncomfortable, we never said that adaptability wasn't uncomfortable. It will still allow you the choice to choose and change things in a way that you want to, so that you're maneuvering through it with an allowance for yourself, rather than making it so about protection in a way that says, I need to look outside myself and point fingers. The questions alone can change everything, because the moment that you become aware of your pattern, you're no longer being completely controlled by it, and you're able to create the separation between yourself and your reaction. And I think that you begin to observe really through that more rational way of going about it, in a way that's no longer allowing just that automated self on autopilot. And we have a lot of things in our life that we can go on autopilot. Perhaps it's, you're driving, you're sitting in your car. I mean, how often are we just driving on automatic because we're so used to it? We have our back seat, we're reaching back here, we're not really paying attention. And until somebody comes really quickly at your side, you're like, oh, okay. Those are the types of adaptabilities we're talking about. How are we reacting in that moment when somebody comes to your side? It's really quick, because we're just automatically going through life. Not every change in itself becomes something that has to be so awakened that you have to, cause yourself to move so quickly. But it does allow you to see how you're reacting. Once you see that you have options, it creates that almost that feeling of freedom, that allowance of yourself, that ability to really just go with the flow. And when you're able to go with the flow, it's like having water flow over your hands. If you're so busy holding on and not allowing the water to actually open and cup some in your hand, you're allowing more things to come into your life, like abundance. More things come in your life, like love, the things that you're actually asking for, because if you're so holding so tightly about how you control the situation, then you can allow it to come in whatever adaptable way it comes, rather than saying it needs to be this way. And oftentimes when we're manifesting things in our lives, that's exactly what we're doing. We're holding so tightly because it needs to come in exactly this way. We don't ever allow it just to come in a way that we're cupping it and allowing it to be in a way that it comes in a form that may not be something that we're used to, but then it shows up in such a more beautiful, vibrant, magical way. And then we ask ourselves, are we allowing that feeling to show up for me right now in any sort of capacity, and the adaptable way of allowing just that flow to grow us as people in that moment. Because if we allow every moment to be more of a learning experience, I think that that's the way that we allows us to really shine. Yes. And adaptability often really can be broken down into more of a long-term understanding of recognition. So it can often show up in places, things like overthinking, being persuasive, procrastination, perfectionism. There's so many places, people pleasing. All of these things are designs that are constantly stacked on each other of stresses. They become these difficult moments of making decisions. I think that needs certainty before taking action. And that's where you're holding so tightly. That's where it becomes where you no longer are allowing things to flow. And the body knows. The body is so smart. It gives you those clues as to what's going on. You can start to feel your shoulders hunch over, or you start to feel things in your tensity in your neck, or your jaw starts to clench, or maybe even you can't breathe because your chest is so tight. All of those things become really hard. Maybe even swallowing becomes hard. This is for all those people that can't sleep at night. Maybe you're the one that just wakes up in the middle of the night and are having a hard time sleeping. Those are all really just signals, not that you're broken, but that it's information. It's telling you that you're having a hard time adapting to whatever situation you're in, whatever you have allowed yourself to be in that moment. And those signals really give you clues as to what's really happening under your patterns that you may have had been running for a really, really long time. And your system's just telling you a way that you can process life a little bit easier, allowing yourself with a little bit more awareness, grace, and choice, recognizing that everybody goes through the same sort of things too. You're not alone. We all do it. We all go through these types of moments where we don't know how to maneuver through it, and we learn to adapt. Some of us are better at it than others. That's the only difference. And it allows for things to really build a relationship with ourselves as we maneuver through it. So, how do we become more adaptable? The first step is to get really, really curious about ourselves, about the moment and situation we're in. And sometimes just taking that little half a second to take a breath and just observe and then respond, because curiosity is one of the most powerful ways and tools that you can use to really bring the situation back into a more amicable way between people, in the way of reactions or the moment, or the way that, because I can tell you there's been many times when I was in my when I was younger, where I wasn't unable to maneuver a situation thinking that I had to control it a specific way. And I have children now that are older. They're more and they're adults now. And I watch and I see some of the things that they have gleaned and learned when being adaptable in the way that they also go through every moment. And a lot of times we're looking from our past, just like they are when they were with me, from our parents, how they learned it, how to maneuver through it, and how to actually be able to be in the moment without judgment. And I would say that there are a lot of things that maybe happened to you or happened to them, or that may have interfered with the way that you can be adaptable today. That doesn't mean you need to judge it or ask yourself why change can't happen. It just gives you that moment of understanding that it may be a little bit difficult, and it takes a new habit. Everything takes a new habit. Even if you're changing a belief, a bottom belief, and you're changing it, and you feel so much better because you relieve that stress. The difficulty of learning a new habit happens for everybody. It's like learning how to stop eating sugar when you've been eating sugar your entire life. Your body goes through a chemical balance where it's allowing you to change certain things within you so that you can adapt to no longer giving that sugar to yourself. The problem was never about necessarily being able to move through the difficult situation. It was allowing you to go through the adaptability within your body. instead of asking, why is this happening to me? What is this? I really ask, what is this really showing up instead for me so that you can learn from this? And what opportunity just really truly exists in every single moment so that you cannot currently see. Sometimes we are so blinded by the situation at hand and it's so elevated in our feelings, our emotions that overcome us that we can't really see what's happening so that we can shift from the victim to an observer. The moment that we become that observer is really that ultimate shift where we can become into that new possibilities of emergence that allow us to learn from every situation. And it's just a minor situation where you truly take that switch. It's like a little key that in our mind that just goes, I'm going to take 2 seconds to just know and be self-aware and honest with myself about my automatic responses and notice the story, the emotions, the behaviors, everything that's going on with myself, and really take that pressure off and allow the circumstance to be what it is in its moment so that I can begin to observe the moment that's happening around us and what's happening within me. Like, what am I feeling? What am I interpreting in this moment? What am I thinking? What meaning am I assigning to this situation? And is it really true? Is it really happening in this moment? Notice how often your mind is really just carrying away a story to give you what you need as evidence for whatever exists within you that you've already done or had happened to you before so that you can feed a pattern that has happened in your past. Let's say, for instance, someone doesn't text you back. A story appears, right? They send you a text. Now instantly, or they don't send you a text. Now instantly you're wondering why on earth you have sent a text to somebody, but they're not texting you back. You're going from all those times, those places where things might have happened between relationships where something went wrong. Something could have been heightened or someone avoided you, or you avoided somebody else. So they may possibly have done the same thing to you. That story starts to really fill in the gaps, is what I like to call it. And those gaps really start to turn in your mind and start to give you that narrative of that story that really turn everything into a heightened situation that no longer allow the adaptability or the interpretation of the person that is going to be receiving text. Perhaps they're just busy. Perhaps things are just moving a little bit slower for them, or perhaps you've created a moment where you needed a lesson or something to learn in that moment that said, hey, this is a moment that you're having these feelings. Notice how you're feeling in this moment when you don't get that text response right back. Is that the way that you want to react and respond, or fill in the gaps when you don't receive a text back? Maybe it's something that has to do with business. Maybe your business starts to slow down, or people aren't showing up the way that they used to. That there's always a story or a narrative to everything that goes on. That story often arrives before the facts ever appear. And so what are we feeding ourselves? Are we feeding ourselves from a higher vibration that really allows for a place of adaptability to be a narrative and a possibility of greatness? Or are we coming from all of our past lower vibration places that don't really allow for, I mean, they're just so rigid for movement, for it's that control again, because we're used to it, something that we know? Or are we allowing it just to give us a new narrative of what might have happened so that we can maybe get that aha moment and we have a new neuroplasticity way of learning that because we have seen that other ways can happen. Someone's narrative that actually happened in a story can give you two different ways of awareness. And again, two different people can have two different interpretations for the exact same moment. One person can see a text or business not being as great at the moment that they expected to be two different narratives. The situation is one thing, but the interpretation is completely another. And this is where that, again, that awareness becomes so powerful that allows you to really recognize what's going on underneath your behavior, your reactions, the narrative, the gap that you're feeding in the moments, every moment that you have it, and allowing it, whether or not you're rigid or adaptable. What are you choosing? The next step would really be allowing that flexibility in a way that most people don't believe that they need to have some sort of certainty, really just to move forward. How often are we looking for outside of ourselves for something that gives us some certainty? Even in that text that was sent out, are you looking for someone to give you back certainty that everything is okay? Because we're looking for safety within ourselves to feel like we're okay. Confidence grows when we start to recognize that we are okay in every moment. It often is built in the actions, not before. And if you think about learning maybe to ride your bike, you're not waiting until your confidence to get ready to ride your bike. You have to go through to learn how to pedal, right? You have to learn to push off. You're just going to go, and you might fall a few times, but your confidence develops as you keep getting back up and learning to really ride that bike. You know, you might be really wobbly at first, it might be really hard, but once you learn, you've got it. And a lot of sayings go for this reason, and the learning of how to ride a bike is it's just like riding a bike, because most of life is like riding a bike. It takes time in the very beginning to learn how to balance things out within yourself of what you need, and still giving you the possibility to move forward and pedal through life in a way that sometimes you have to coast, sometimes you have to push harder to go up a hill. Whatever it is, that's exactly how life is. It's not always the same. It allows you to really move where you have to turn this way or you're turning that way when you're riding on your bike. But it all started with you having to move forward rather than staying stagnant. The same is true with life. Most people are waiting for certainty. They're waiting for that feeling of being ready and for an outcome that no longer is allowing for that fear to take over where it just disappears. But certainty isn't necessarily where the fear disappears. It's often where that precision allows you to see that it may be there in that moment, but you're still entering something that's new. Adaptable people really, they understand that uncertainty is always going to happen. It's just there. It's something that's part of life. It's change. Everything is inevitably going to change. Relationships are going to change. It's part of growth. It's learning to feel through the uncertainty. It's becoming comfortable enough to know that the uncomfortable is comfortable. And that kind of sounds really challenging, but it's something that we learn every day as the next step. It's like being able to take our steps and walking through a doorway that's really dark. And it can be scary, especially if you're not prepared to go through something that's dark. And the flashlight is knowing who you are, that you're ready to walk through that door, knowing that you can go through anything in the dark, no matter what comes at you, because you're the flashlight. You have all the answers and all the tools within you. And the goal isn't perfection. I want you to think about like a GPS. When you miss the turn, it doesn't just spend 20 minutes, criticizing yourself or recalculating, or it's adapting to the way that you learn. The same thing happens within you when you're going into the dark and you're turning on the light. Sure, you might have to feel through the certain types of things to know where you're going, but eventually you start to realize you're pretty safe, and it may be flat and it may be you're walking up a hill, but you know that you have all the tools to make it through. So rather than seeing something as a failure, even if you trip over a rock that's in the dark, you know that it's still working for you because you can get back up in every moment and you just dust yourself off and you knew how to adapt. And that's where the adjustment came in, because instead of seeing it as setbacks and proof that you weren't able to make it through, you saw it as a way of growth. It gave you information. It really helped you to adapt, and rather than being stuck, and you had that self-trust within yourself. And that's where that adaptability, that's where that lives. That's where it allows you to really truly be you. Most people spend their lives trying to trust circumstances or outcomes or the plan. But does a plan ever really stick completely to the plan? Not usually. No, it's pretty rare if it actually goes as guaranteed. It usually plans change. I mean, people change. Things happen. Just before we came on this webinar, things were changing and adapting every left and right. Things were not working. Technology today wasn't working. Things weren't being sent out. Life changes. Everything is adaptable, and it's really just trusting the situation and yourself. And it really just comes back to, and I'm going to say it all the time, yourself. And because if you're outsourcing it to other people, you're not allowing yourself to learn how to let things unfold in a way that you know how to problem solve through the moment. And when you know how to problem solve through any moment and know that you have this tool or that tool to move through it, you know that you can grow through any and face any sort of difficulty rather than having it setbacks. Moments happen where you never thought that you could handle. I know that there are certain ones that I certainly thought, gosh, I don't know if I can handle this situation anymore. I'm overstressed. I don't know that, I could do any more. And then I just take that deep breath. And I remember what matters most is the moment right here, the one I'm in, not the one I'm trying to get to, not all the things that have happened in my past, but the one right here, right now, because that's the ultimate one that really makes the difference. And when you see that it's only the one that's right here and what I can manage within my frame of what I'm doing, then it's not so hard. I can take a deep breath and I can take a step forward and I can simply make it the capacity with which I can, not with which somebody else can, not with what somebody thinks I should be, or how I need to maneuver in a way that makes it easier for somebody else, but to trust myself in the way that I need to grow to help me to move forward. And I just get curious because in that moment, I'm not being so rigid. Curiosity and that virtue allows you to really step into that moment of that lightheartedness of curiness where it allows awareness, that flexibility, that self-trust. It begins where you work in sync with the moments that you're in, the molecules, the collaboration with your connection, that powerfulness that happens to understand harmony within yourself, that you find those solutions to adapt to anything. And it becomes the teacher within the moment. And the pressure no longer feels like proof that you need, or that basically that something's wrong. It becomes information. And uncertainty no longer becomes and it feels like it's danger anymore. And it becomes something that's possible. And you move right through it. Fear just becomes something that it's there. It's a discomfort. That's it. And a discomfort is something that you can feel within you, but it doesn't have to consume you. It is not who you are. That's the difference. I think a lot of us don't see it as, as we are two separate things from our feelings that could be coming in as our definition of who we are. And when we learn to adjust and make it differently of who we are and what we're actually feeling in the moment and seeing ourselves in a way that could be more growth mentality, then we can really move through that adaptability in a way that becomes something that we can feel, see, share with other people, help that we can move and people can see it. When you know yourself and you know how to adapt through a moment without allowing it to ruin your day, move through it in a way that allows you to feel like yourself. It's felt, it's heard, it's seen. And you no longer are allowing the circumstances around you to move you in any sort of way. It's different. It becomes more of who you really are because you're ready. You become ready. You become that light that shines through that doorway that says, here I am. If you need help, I can help you too. Let's learn to work and navigate this together. And I love how we can all adapt and grow together. Not that you're carrying somebody else, but information to help them on their path. And that's where adaptability really comes. So I think that I've covered adaptability in a way that allows you to really helps you gain choice, freedom. And I want to thank you for being here today, and thank you for the interpreters. I just remember that choices is always there, and change is inevitable. Growth is an option, and being able to be adaptable is really that bridge between you and understanding the entire situation in every moment without having to keep that bridge deep. I hope you understand adaptability, and I appreciate you being here today. That was a lot of fun. I really had a good time. I love talking about adaptability because it really is about in the moment. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, ladies, for being here today. It was so fun. I will talk to you all later. See you.